Long before European ships crossed the ocean, hundreds of thousands of Native Americans had governed the North American continent for millennia, building complex, sophisticated societies. But in the 15th and 16th centuries, European empires arrived, searching for direct trade routes and vast natural resources. European powers moved inland to establish permanent, profit-driven settlements like Jamestown and Plymouth. As these colonies grew, their conflicting claims crashed into one another and into the native populations already living there, forcing violent territorial overlaps. The competition for the Ohio River Valley ignited the 7 Years' War, known locally as the French and Indian War. The British victory pushed France out of the territory, but the global conflict drained the London treasury, leaving the empire with massive war debt. Early American history is often remembered as a story of simple farmers surviving harsh winters. In reality, the colonies were the opening front of an aggressive global imperial conflict to dominate a continent. To pay off the debt from fighting the French, the British Parliament levied a series of direct taxes on the American colonies. They targeted everyday items like paper, glass, and tea, all without consulting the colonial legislatures. The colonists had just bled to secure this land and expected the rights of full British citizens, including political representation. They organized boycotts, ransacked the homes of royal officials, and eventually stood their ground at Lexington and Concord, initiating the American Revolution. Following their victory, the newly independent states struggled to manage their economies and borders under a weak alliance. In 1787, they drafted a new constitution, building a central government with 3 branches to check federal authority. To secure ratification, framers purposefully avoided resolving chattel slavery. They embedded compromises allowing the practice to expand, ensuring they could appease Southern delegates and keep the fragile Union intact. The United States emerged from a cycle of territorial expansion and imperial debt. It was now governed by a legal framework that secured its immediate survival by pausing rather than solving its deepest moral contradiction. By the 1840s, a specific ideological belief took hold across the country. Americans argued it was their divine right and obvious fate to conquer and settle the entire landmass from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, a concept known as manifest destiny. The 1803 Louisiana Purchase had already extended the nation's borders to the Rocky Mountains. Driven by the promise of cheap land and the discovery of gold in California, hundreds of thousands of settlers packed into wagon trains and poured across the plains. This mass migration required clearing the land of the people already living there. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson pushed through the Indian Removal Act, forcing the deadly relocation of tens of thousands of Native Americans west of the Mississippi River, along the Trail of Tears. The push west also meant colliding with the Republic of Mexico. After the U.S. annexed Texas in 1845, President James K. Polk sent troops into disputed territory, provoking a 2-year war that ended with the United States taking control of California, New Mexico, and the broader Southwest. The American map expanded through the continuous military and political conquest of pre-existing nations and territories. Look at this map of the United States in the mid-19th century. A fragile line maintained an exact political balance in Congress between states that banned slavery and states that relied on it. But the sudden addition of over 1 million square miles of Western territory threatened to destroy that equilibrium completely. Congress tried to compromise by letting settlers in places like Kansas vote on whether to allow slavery, a policy called popular sovereignty. Instead of a peaceful vote, pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers flooded the territory, turning it into a violent proxy war known as Bleeding Kansas. The violence soon spread beyond the territories. Radical abolitionists, like a preacher named John Brown, decided that bloodshed was the only remaining option. In 1859, Brown raided a federal armory at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, attempting to arm enslaved people and ignite a nationwide rebellion. Brown was executed, but the political center had collapsed. When Abraham Lincoln, a Republican who opposed the expansion of slavery, won the presidency in 1860, Southern states decided their economic system was no longer safe within the Union. Within months, they seceded. The relentless drive to push the country's borders westward forced the federal government to decide exactly what kind of economy and society those new states would hold. The nation could no longer compromise on human bondage, and it tore itself apart. The compromises written into the Constitution in 1787 finally exploded into open warfare in 1861. The rapid expansion across the continent had collided directly with the unresolved contradiction of slavery. The ensuing Civil War scaled rapidly into a grueling industrial conflict. Union generals like Ulysses S. Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman employed the tactic of total war, systematically burning Southern infrastructure, crops, and rail lines to completely break the Confederacy's ability to fight. As the Union secured military victories, it also secured legislative change. Congress passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, officially abolishing slavery across the country, establishing birthright citizenship, and guaranteeing the right to vote regardless of race. The federal government preserved the Union and forcibly eradicated the nation's original flaw, but the cost was staggering, with roughly 600,000 American lives lost to settle the question of what the country would become. With the war over, the United States immediately pivoted back to physical and economic expansion. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad connected the coasts, and the country transitioned rapidly from an agrarian society into a massive industrial machine during the Gilded Age. However, this focus on industrial wealth and national unity came at a severe social cost. During the contested election of 1876, politicians struck a deal known as the Compromise of 1877. The federal government agreed to pull its troops out of the South, effectively abandoning the project of Reconstruction in exchange for political pacification and economic stability. Without federal protection, Southern states immediately began stripping away the newly won rights of Black Americans. They implemented systemic disenfranchisement and codified segregation through Jim Crow laws, subjecting freed people to decades of violence and oppression. By the time the 1900s arrived, the United States was in control of a continent and a world-leading industrial engine. This growth came through a repeating historical loop, where expansion was consistently purchased through catastrophic conflict and the compromise of human rights.